Hello there. My name is Dr. Salim Javed. I am an associate professor at the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication at India's Lalita Devi Institute of Management and Sciences. We have been producing a series by the name of Understanding Cinema, where we have been talking about how cinema started in the world and then how it came to India. What were the phases through which Indian cinema went through? What were the genres in which it excelled? What were the other things? But if you remember that I have been complaining about the lackluster content that has been produced for a long time. Now, if I complain, what is my contribution towards it? I have started talking about story format, different story formats, which will help writers, young writers to form their stories better. In the last video, if you remember, we talked about the Black Snyder beat sheet, where we talked about the opening image, theme stated, setup, catalyst, debate, break into two, B story, fun and game, midpoint, bad guy, close in, all is lost, dark night of the soul, break into three, finale, and the final images. If you remember, we talked about it almost for an hour. Now, in today's lecture, we are going to talk about the hero's journey, which was written by Joseph Campbell, and he has talked about he studied a lot of literature, available literature, be that classic or up till his time, and he tried to draw similarities among different pieces of literature where the journey of a hero, how it has been how it has been imagined, how it takes turns and twists. So he studied a lot of books, and this is what he came up with, Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. Now, if you see, there are three different parts. One is called the departure, second is called the initiation, and the third is called the return. If you remember, when I was talking about different story formats, I initially started talking about Aristotle's model of storytelling, where you have a beginning, middle, and end. And there are a lot of people who say that nobody uses that sort of a format, but eventually many of the formats broadly fall into the same. So here you do not have beginning, middle, and end. So here you have the departure, the initiation, and the return. Now, before I talk about Joseph Campbell, Professor Joseph Campbell argues in his book, The Heroes with a Thousand Faces, this is the name of his book, The Heroes with a Thousand Faces, that all mythical stories follow the same archetype, the monolith. So if I say that today I'm going to talk about hero's journey, one of the popular names is monomyth also, or the hero's journey, you can call it. In the term, hero's journey is the term he uses to describe the framework. Now, this is important to remember. When I'm talking about story formats, I'm talking about different frameworks, how different writers, how different observers, how different people have seen common patterns among or across stories, and they have come up with a sort of like, this is how the story goes, these are the stages that the hero, the protagonist of the story goes through, these are the important points, this is how, if you tell your story, it will be a very nice story, it has the potential, all the frameworks. I talked about Black Snyder's beat sheet. Today I'm talking about monomyth or the hero's journey, and in coming videos I will talk about different story formats. There are a lot of story formats. Now, this is important to understand, reason being that when you understand the way a story meanders, it becomes easy to observe the film objectively for the writers and for the creative people. So whatever, if I talk about Joseph Campbell, if I talk about Black Snyder, if I talk about Aristotle, and there are 12 stages of story, 7 stages of story, there are a lot of story formats which I'll be talking about in coming videos. But remember that these are frameworks, and telling you how a story can move in a linear fashion and in more effective fashion also. So these are the frameworks. So monomyth or the hero's journey is a framework. So when he talks about, when Joseph Campbell talks about, hero's journey, he sums it up like a hero ventures forth from the world of common day into a region of supernatural wonder. Fabulous forces are there encountered and a decisive victory is won. The hero comes back from this mysterious adventure with the power to bestow boon on his fellow men. Now, there are different reasons why he or she enters in this world, which is like he or she is scared, not surprised, rather scared, and he or she does not believe. But when he or she enters in this mysterious world, then the story goes in such a way that they are bound to, they're bound to overcome all the obstacle, and there is a decisive victory. And then when there is a victory, then it is also in a lot of stories, hero doesn't come back from the unknown world he or she enters, but most of the protagonists or heroes of the story, they usually come back to their normal life with the power to bestow boon on the fellow men. Now, if you look at this like that I was talking about, these are the different stages that Joseph Campbell eventually talks about in his film. So this is a broader structure of that journey. Now, the first part, which is called the departure, obviously there has to be departure, otherwise how the protagonist will move from his normal world to unknown territory. So first stage, or so-called, according to Aristotle, it is the beginning, So the beginning part, according to Aristotle and according to Joseph Campbell, it is the departure. So the first stage of this part is called the call for action. There has to be something which actually forces or motivates the protagonist to take up the journey. Then obviously there is a call. Whether he is taken or not, there are a lot of stages in between. So there is a call for action. Then you have a refusal of call. And sometimes it happens that what seems an opportunity from the story perspective may not be, as per the life of the character. So there is an initial denial. Then there is supernatural aid. Please understand that he has read a lot of classics, so you will hear these sort of terminology. So there is a supernatural aid or help sort of a thing, if I talk about in Black Snyder style. Crossing the threshold, there has to be a point after which all this refusal of call or supernatural aid come together, and there is a crossing of threshold, and after that he starts thinking. Then very interesting terminology called belly of the whale. Now this is very interesting. When I'll be explaining about these things, then I will talk about. Now this entire departure portion, which is basically, according to Aristotle, which can be the beginning part, is divided into the call for action, refusal of call, supernatural aid, crossing the threshold, and belly of the whale. Now let's come to the middle part. According to Aristotle and according to Joseph Campbell, it is the initiation. Now the road of trials, meeting the goddess, temptation, atonement with the father, apotheosis, and then the ultimate boon. Now this becomes the middle part. What according to Aristotle is called the end, or according to Joseph Campbell, what is called the return, is comprised of the refusal of return. Now this is very interesting, and like a lot of good films have this particular point, refusal of return. Then you have magic flight, then you have rescue from without, crossing the return threshold, master of the true world, and the freedom to live. Now if you understand these three different parts, there are like a lot of stages. Now let's see what each stage mean and how different films have used these stages. Now that portion is going to be really interesting, where we will find out how these things is being look, you and I see these things on screen. It is not that these are completely unfamiliar things, but sometimes it becomes really difficult to put it in words. So all these frameworks, be that of Black Snyder or Joseph Campbell or a lot of other people that I am eventually going to talk about, they are putting words to what you and I have been thinking. Like suppose if I want to write a story, or suppose you want to write a story, then if you know that these are the things that a good story, but not necessarily, otherwise we'll keep on producing the same things again and again. So usually good stories should, not must, should have these stages or should have these points. Like this is absolutely, there are a lot of, now please understand, if I'm talking about Black Snyder or Joseph Campbell or in a lot of other story formats, I'm also going to talk about different countries' formats also, like in what is how we Indians think of a story, what is our own format. If you remember that there was a point of time in one of my lectures I said, most of you must have seen a film called Inception. Now, when this film came, I was like happily surprised, because the format of this particular film, the Inception, like a lot of people have said that we are incapable of producing these kind of stories. I personally do not agree with that. Reason being that when you look at Inception, I'm not talking about VFX, but I'm talking about in terms of specifically about story structure. Now, when you talk about Inception, there are like they talk about conscious, subconscious, and different layers of consciousness or subconsciousness, and how you may enter in a dream, how the activity in a specific level of dream is affecting the person on the other layer of the dream, and all these things. Now, most of you, if you have spent some time with your grandparents, and they were a great house of stories, there used to be a format, I specifically remember, where there is a king, and then in the palace of that king there is somebody comes with a bird, and that bird is capable of speaking in human voice. So the parrot or the bird start narrating a story of a young prince and princess. And this young prince, when he goes to hunting, there is where he meets a specific turtle. That turtle has the capacity to speak, and then that turtle also tells a story, and in his story there are a lot of things. Then there is a riddle, then this prince solves that riddle, then the parrot, the king and the parrot, there is also a riddle. Vikram Vetal is another very good example of these sort of stories. Now you have a story within a story within a story within a story, and you can take it to multiple levels as much as you can manage it. And there were wonderful stories. Now there is a technical term for this called emboxing the story within a story. Now this is what exactly was happening in Inception. Now tell me if it is not an Indian format of storytelling. Now that's the only reason that I'm talking about different story formats. Now let's see what each point in departure, in initiation and return has to offer us. Now when we talk about the departure part, the first is the call to adventure or call for an adventure. A challenge, treat or opportunity is thrust upon the hero out of the blue. Now this, like, if you remember that when I was talking about Bahubali, where the lady comes out of the cave, and she is carrying a baby in her hands, and then she crosses the river. So there is a challenge, there is a threat, and in this particular story there is a challenge, there is a threat, and this is which is thrust upon the hero out of the blue. Now, so that when I talk about the call to adventure, this is what I mean, that there is a challenge, threat, or opportunity with which the protagonist or person related to protagonist, or the person who is going to influence the life of the protagonist starts with. Now, there is the second point says the refusal of the call. Now the hero initially rejects the summons because he or she is reluctant to leave their safe heavens and confront their fears. Now this is really important to understand. Why? Because there are times when, as I said, if you remember, that what is an opportunity from a story perspective may not be an opportunity for the character. That's why, when you try to write a good character, you think in terms of the character. Like, suppose, if I'll be giving this example, but it is important to bring this point at this point of time. Like, if you have seen Matrix, now Neo has been living dual life. In broad daylight, he goes to an office, works in a certain capacity, but in night, he is a well-known hacker. Now, when Neo technically receives a message from Trinity that you are living in Matrix and you need to get out of the Matrix, so there is an initial refusal of this call. So you initially refuse. And if you remember, when I was talking about Harry Potter, like when letters starts coming from Hogwarts, and the guardian starts, they try to stop the call. So they say, no, you do not have any background. No, this letter is not for you. So there is a refusal of the call. Now, when I give, like as I'm giving some examples on these points, then you are able to understand it better. Now, that is what I'm saying, that if you understand these things, you will understand that these are not, there is, like, you have been watching it, but you did not know that this specific thing can be written or can be presented from this format point of view. Now, the third says supernatural aid. It is like, if you have seen Karate Kid or Jigger or all those films where there is actually a mentor who is a supernatural assistance in the form of guiding figure, Obi-Wan and all these people who equips and inspire the hero. Now, crossing the threshold that I was talking about, this particular point. Now, the hero has crossed the threshold and begun their journey. Now, this is something that, if you remember, that when I was talking about Black Snyder's story format, there is where I was talking about that there is a point of no return. So crossing the threshold or point of no return is exactly the same thing that when I was saying that Bahubali, after looking at Mask and imagining what this sort of a person can be, he goes up, and now, because now he has gone up and he has left his world, which is down the hill completely, now there is no turning back. So that is called the crossing the threshold. So the hero has crossed the threshold and has begun his or her journey. Now, belly of the whale, which is like very interesting term. This is basically the point of no return. Almost there is a slight difference. Like, now, what is a minor difference between crossing the threshold and belly of the whale, where I'm saying the point of no return, or the hero faces is his or her first great challenge. Now, a lot of I have been hearing this allegation that, sir, when you talk about understanding cinema, especially in India, there are a lot of examples from foreign films, like a lot of people who talk about writing, who talk about direction, who talk about sound or production design, and a lot of other things. They give foreign examples. There are many reasons for it. That first, their academics is like really works on their own film. They take pride. There is a lot of aesthetics, science, physics involved in the production, and yes, your complaint is genuine, but it is not always the case. Like, suppose for these 2 points where there is a very minor difference. Now, let me give you an example of Bahubali only. Bahubali, because most of you have seen, so most of the time I give example of Bahubali or Three Idiot. Now, crossing the threshold is something that where he looks at Mars, sings a song, goes up to the hill. There is where he happens to see the girl. Belly of the whale is, or the point of no return, is when he or she starts a fight with the soldiers. Now, you see it as a sequence that he's going up. So going up is a sequence, then fighting is a sequence. But there is a psychology, there is a format, there is a structure that is working behind all these things. And when you see these that going up, finding the girl, and then fighting because on behalf of her or with her for that matter, and then now you have put yourself in something that even if you want to go back, you cannot go back, because now the people that you have fought with they have seen your face, and they will find out, and then they will try to hunt you down also. So it is not about crossing the threshold, it is also about belly of the whale or no return or something like. Suppose belly of the whale, I give you a certain example, like suppose somebody has been bothering you, you meet a mentor, there is, like he talks about, then he starts training you, but it is between, till this day it is between you and your mentor, and he may spiritually or physically uplift you, but technically it is between you and the mentor. But now, how there is point of no return. So suppose you have been bullied, there has been a group of people who has been beating you, and now you go, and with the help of the training or this physical or spiritual upliftment, you go and beat one of the gang members of that group. Now after that, when they will come to know that one of their members has been beaten up by a person who has been bullied by the group, imagine when they come to know about it, are they going to spare you? So that is the minor difference between crossing the threshold and belly of the whale. Now now this is like you have started it now and you are into it. So that is like from nowhere, now you are into it, is the first stage, or called the beginning. Now the second stage starts, which is called the initiation, or basically the journey or the middle part of it, where you will like the B story and all those things will happen here. Now the road of trials. To begin his metamorphosis, the hero must endure several trials or tribulations. The hero usually fails in at least one of the areas. Now this is something that you must have seen in a lot of sports film, where your protagonist is like has geared up completely. He is like the montage of Rocky and everything. But there is one specific area, like you can find this particular point in a film like Chandni Chowk to China, कि तुम्हारे 1000 मूव से मुझे खतरा नहीं है, लेकिन मुझे तुम्हारे उस एक मूव से खतरा है जो तुमने 1000 बार किया हो. So hero is finding, though hero is like in the training process, he has started giving he has started showing better results and everything, but there is a specific area, a kind of one very specific element which he or she is not able to overcome. So there are trials, there are tribulations, there are a lot of exercise, there are a lot of events happening, but there is one weak bone left somewhere, which eventually the antagonist come to know about it and actually hits very hard at that weak bone, not in physical sense, in all the senses. And that is where he, जिसे हम हिंदी में तुरुप का इक्का कहते हैं, all those sort of things are here. Now the next point is the meeting with the goddess. Now goddess, please understand, it necessarily need not to be a goddess. It can be allies, it can be a friend also, it can be a love interest also, like the Beast story according to Black Snyder. So there is a meeting with goddess, and this goddess, or the it need not to be physical also, it need not to be a human also. One of the best examples that I always quote is Wall-E, where it's not about human, though there are human emotions, but absolutely not in human form. So now this basically, as per Snyder, it is like almost the Beast story. So we'll talk about it very soon.